Hey, it's me, it's Jeff Ramos, and I'm here to show you how I made this cute looking little bird in Aseprite on Windows. So I drew this on a monitor tablet. I use an XP Pen 15.6. If you're familiar with the Wacom Cintiqs, it's similar to that, although it's about $1,000 less. I really love it a lot. I had the 13 for a couple days, and I decided to upgrade to the 15.6, and it was only $20 more. So what do you know? So I'll show you how I did this. I run it pretty fast, but I'll explain everything. It's pretty straightforward. It's not as complicated as it looks. All right, so here we go. So this is Aseprite on Windows. Again, I'm just using a monitor tablet. So I usually start off by doing some really basic shapes. So I have symmetry on, and I just make a big old blob for the body. And when I'm doing another shape, whether it's like an arm or a leg, or in this case a head, I like to do it in a different color. It's gonna have the same base color, but I just like having different colors so I can judge the shapes better. And you can see there I kind of pulled out a little bit for the tail. Now what I do here with the green is when I'm trying to just get perspective, basically, I will use a color that is terrible and won't be in the picture at all. So in this case, a lime green. And that just helps me get a sense of the perspective. And I'll eventually just delete it later. But it's really helpful for me to, even though I'm looking at a reference photo while I'm doing this, it's always good to have the reference lines in the drawing itself to gain a sense of the perspective. So the bird has this, and I should have looked up what kind of bird it was, but I didn't really look it up. I literally Googled plump bird, I think, and then just found something that was really cute and something that I thought would be fun and complicated to do for a pixel art drawing. So as you saw at the top of the video, the bird has all this different colored plumage or feathers, whatever you want to call the term. So I just lay down the base colors, and when you're at this stage, when you're laying down base colors and some like highlight colors, I always feel like unconfident that it's going to be a good drawing. But eventually it does pan out. I really like the way it turned out. But again, when you're at this stage, you'd have to be confident that you're just laying down base colors, so there's not going to be a lot of dimension in it. Uh, you might see a couple of times where I accidentally fill in the wrong color. I'm still getting used to using this particular application with the express keys on the XP Pen. Other applications like Blender or Photoshop, I'm a little bit more comfortable with, but I don't know, for some reason, I use the least amount of buttons on Aseprite, and I still get confused and press the wrong buttons and end up filling in things. And so the bird has these little sort of stripes that go down its head through its the thin small feathers on its head, and I only do like three of them. I could have actually done the whole thing and made it look more complicated and intricate, but I didn't want to over detail it because I wasn't sure how long I was going to spend on this individual drawing. It took about, I think, about 40 minutes altogether, and obviously in this time lapse it's about 10 minutes, but I still like the way it turned out either without all the really intense details. And so now I'm laying down some of the darker values to start building some of the complexity and dimension in there. So I'm just kind of doing some of the little rows of feathers that might be showing up there. And then I'm kind of, putting this darker blue against the orange there. So it's to kind of show like these feathers are below the orange feathers, which are on top. And then you can see I'm starting to add a little bit of like gradient there of colors, and I'm adding some highlights here too. So nothing too complicated at this point. It seems pretty straightforward. And since it's feathers, which is like not necessarily the easiest thing to do in pixel art, I'm just sort of freestyling it for now, and I'll eventually clean up some of these. But you see, like the palette that I'm using there is something that I actually created myself. In Aseprite, actually, you can load a bunch of different palettes, like from Game Boy or NES, a handful of other like ones that the community have sort of determined are like the best ones, but I kind of made one for myself a while back, and not all the colors are perfect. Like the blues, the gradients in the blues aren't great. You can see the whites and the grays look pretty good. You can see there's some anti-aliasing in the highlighting there. I don't do a lot of anti-aliasing in this. Anti-aliasing is something I'm still trying to get better at, and there's other drawings that I've done that are more in line with doing anti-aliasing, but not this one. But you can see I did it in a bit in the eye and a bit the beak. Like little black things like that, like the eye or the beak, are really simple things to do anti-aliasing with. I guess just because I have the gradients and the blacks away, I really like the blues. I think there's a big gap in the colors, so it's not great. Even with these oranges, the gaps in colors I think are a little bit too high, so I need to redo them. And I think that would make anti-aliasing a little bit easier. And obviously, most people will just create the palettes they need on the fly. That's what most like more experienced pixel artists do. But I'm still fairly new at it. I'm pretty okay, but there's a lot of things that I don't do. You'll see there though that I did use the base color, the orange, to kind of drop a little shadow because I was using that lighter orange color there. So just to give it a little bit of depth, I just brought in the base color again. And so in the photo I'm looking at, the reference, the feathers, the orange feathers specifically, kind of puff out a little bit, and they puff out, and as they puff out, they actually get brighter than the base, whatever the base color would be here, it would be this orange. So I kind of doing that a little bit here. It's not perfect, but I think it's fine the way it came out. Looking at it now, there's probably a few things I could have done a little bit differently, but you know, I never. It's weird because this is at 100 by 100 pixels, so it's not the biggest canvas, and so trying to get a lot of detail there is a little bit difficult. Like I'm traditionally an illustrator, and like I usually draw pencil, and I do a lot of detailing there and a lot of value there. So it's a lot harder to do that sort of look in pixel art, especially when your palette is limited and the space you have is limited. Whereas in traditional illustration, I typically draw in a large size, and especially if it's digital, I can move things around, and you can really, I can do like per pixel, I can do stuff like that. Where in that case, like pixel stuff is a little bit easier, but obviously you have the sort of, the density of absolute white to absolute dark, and you can do a lot of interesting stuff there. So getting near the end of the drawing here, actually. So now I'm just. So the whole bottom half of the bird, I use more just bigger values overall. Like in the face, obviously it's a smaller area and there's more details there. But for the bottom of the body, it's just, sort of the belly part. There's not a lot of details there. So you'll see I'll eventually start adding, a sort of dark series of shadows across the whole bottom. So here at first I'm doing it slowly, not thinking that I'm going to do the rest, and I realized later that like it's much better to do a gradient of bigger shadows versus just these little like things. So you see now that I'm filling those in, and it's beginning to look a lot better and give it more depth. And that's a cool thing when you're doing pixel art, when you have these big planes of color, like for instance the back of this bird and its sort of underbelly, it's big planes of color that are not being used, and you're not going to detail. And putting in detail in such broad areas, that's not necessarily what pixel art's good at unless you're doing something really detailed. Then everything needs to be detailed. Whereas when you have these big broad colors and these big planes of color, you can actually just put simple gradients like that, and actually gives it so much more depth, and it's such a simple little thing to do, especially if your color gradients are done well. Like the browns I did are actually pretty good, into like the sort of cream or color is really good. I did that really good scaling. The other colors not so much, like the oranges and the blues I probably need to redo, but at least with these colors it actually looks really good, I think. And from here, and it's really good too, like the way the brown actually goes really good into this sort of this lighter black. I have like no, if you see the palette, there's no absolute black. It's sort of like a very, very dark gray. So that very dark gray looks really good in the back of the feathers there, and I actually like that a lot. And it's because it's sort of a similar value. It's just desaturated, so it actually looks good next to one another, I think. And here, just in the reference photo, the bird standing on the rock, and I was gonna do like little bumps and stuff in the rock. I was being lazy, and B, I didn't want to put too much detail in just the rock, just because I feel like that would just take away from the overall idea of the picture. It's not supposed to be about the rock. It's supposed to be about this really cute bird. And I tried to do some anti-aliasing stuff, but I was like, I didn't really feel like doing it. And it's sort of that you can see in those last three bits in the palette that there should be a grade between those two grays there, but there isn't. So I'll probably end up fixing that. This is not a perfect palette by any stretch. It's something I did a long time ago and never really fixed it. Now that I'm doing more drawings, more pixel art drawings, I'm trying to do pixel dailies every day. I probably should clean this up a bit more, or try to find a more experienced artist who's already done this. But I think a lot of like what's fun about pixel art is figuring out what's good for you. And what I will probably start doing is making palettes per drawing. There's a really simple way to do that, but a really simple methodology to do that. And maybe I'll talk about that in a separate video. But for this one, I just used the palette I already had pre-baked. You can see here I'm trying to do like a gradient background thing, but I just felt like that sort of took away from the drawing and didn't feel like it was necessary. So just to sort of add a little bit more dimension to the drawing. I just add a little bit of shadow under this bird's feet just so, obviously make it look like it's standing on something. I think that's it. I will do a little fix at the end here, but that's mostly what it looks like. So let's just jump to that one final fix. Oh yeah, and I put my little signature. Right, so after staring at it for a while, I realized that it just needed a little bit of shadow on the head just to make it look a little bit more round. And there you go, that's a bird. So hey, if you enjoyed staring at this bird, you can go visit my Patreon and support me, and I can actually do more drawings like this. Kind of go more into detail. I can maybe slow down the video a little bit if you think there needs to be a little bit more detail there, but I really like doing this stuff, and I really like teaching people how to do it. Pixel art is really rewarding and fun when you know some of the basic concepts. And, this is not perfect by any means, and there's a lot, even looking at it now, there's things I could fix, but once you have a little idea of how to do something, you learn that you're really capable of doing a lot of things. So I'd love to do more tutorials around that. So you can go to patreon.com/OJeffRamos. That's OH Jeff Ramos. And, sign up to Patreon. It's still brand new to me. But if you want to do that, you can do that. There's a bunch of different tiers where I give people, high-res photos, the files you can look at. And then for different tiers, there's actually process videos with no commentary and with commentary. So depending on what people want, I can change those things around and give people more, but I think sharing how to do art is really fun, and I like doing it, and I love talking about it. So if you like it, you can go to patreon.com/OJeffRamos and help me out, and I'll love to help you out at the same time. Thanks so much for watching.